Let's look at how we can get perfect bass in our room in multiple seating positions using multiple subwoofers, REW, and MSO software. Several things need to come together to get the perfect bass. You need a good room, we need bass trap, we need a laptop to connect to your pre-pro or receiver, and of course the technical skills to use softwares like REW and MSO. So I'm going to run through a lot of this quickly, and there's a lot of YouTube videos that actually go into details. So this is more like overview and kind of like memory recollection of what do I do or what did I do to get my room the way it is right now. I built my media room 20 years back, and back then it was not a well-known fact about using multiple subwoofers to smoothen out the bass. I initially had the M&K MX350, which should have been sufficient for my room, but since the bass response was not good due to standing waves, concepts I didn't know back then, the salesperson said get something bigger, and I ended up with the M&K MX 5100, which is I think their biggest sub. That is an ultra subwoofer for a 3,000 square feet room, and my room is way smaller, which means that subwoofer is definitely an overkill. So how do we get there? Well, if you're going to build a room, if a 10-foot ceiling, that would be ideal, and then you want to follow the golden ratio. You need to have bass traps, multiple subwoofers, and then you need to measure with REW, take measurements, and then finally use the MSO software to optimize for multiple seating locations. If I could build a room from scratch, I would have gone for a ceiling that's 10 foot high. I think that is kind of ideal for me. 10 by 16 by 26 would be the ideal room. I don't need anything bigger. For small, if it is 8-foot ceiling, then 12 by 20. You want that is the golden ratio, but you don't want a bad room. A bad room is defined by where one side is divisible by another. In my case, my room is actually 8-foot ceiling and it was depth of 16. That would have been a bad room, right? Since 16 is multiple, can be divided by 8. Fortunately, I had my room extended by a foot, which is why you can see it jutting out from the house by a foot. So now it's 17, and therefore it is not a bad room. How would a bad room behave? I have no idea. If you have a bad room, well, let us know. The biggest improvement to the bass response was to run Owen Corning 703 across the entire ceiling. So I have 4 panels stacked on each other, so that gives about 8 inches. And the panels that you buy are 2 feet wide. So I bought an electric bread knife, cut it in the middle so that it's 1 foot wide. And from the fabric store, you can get car fabric, which is used to reduce sound inside a car. So I wrapped all the fiberglass in it, and then I stapled it to the ceiling. So I have Owen Corning 703 running along all the 4 corners on my ceiling, both front, back, and side. And there was an immediate drastic improvement to the bass response. Multiple subwoofers give the best response across many seats. If it's just one seating position, you can probably just get away with one subwoofer and then just EQ it down. In my case, I had an old subwoofer, so I added 2 more. SVS has a sale going on, so they just suggested the 2 SB1000, so that's what I got, and I set that up. To get if you have multiple rows, you probably need 4 subwoofers. I did not have experience with 4. I did buy 4, but one of my corners was not free. I have the rack there, so I did not get much. I didn't see any benefit from going to 4, so I just stuck with 2. Anyway, here's some possible positions that you can try out your subwoofers. Seating distance is important, and you want to avoid sitting at some place where there is a null. So these are some good locations by ratio, and I am sitting at 0.68, which works out to some 11 feet something. Now you do have room modes from side to side too, and in my case, I have a 12-foot 4-inch wide room, and right in the middle there's a 135 hertz dip, and that is about the subwoofer correction. My crossover is at 100, so subwoofer can only get up to 100. So things above that, it can't. So I moved my seat a little bit to the side, but then, I like that experience of watching from the middle. So I'm like, it's okay if I'm losing a little bit at that 135. I want that seat that's right in the middle visually. So that's what I went for. So hardware, what do you need? Well, you do need a laptop with an HDMI. That way you can connect it to your pre-pro or your Integra, whatever that it is that you may have, receiver. And then miniDSP. People in AVS forum said this is a great thing to get, and I got it, and it is truly an awesome toy. It's a fun toy to have around, even if I may not use it in the future. Ideally, I would get a processor that can handle 3 of my subs directly, and I can avoid one device. But this is a keeper. It's a really good device. It's $250, and you also need the mic because REW just understands this mic. The moment it's plugged in and you turn on the software, it knows you have this mic and it'll just start using it. And they also, the mic also comes with a calibration that you can load into your REW. There is another site where if you pay $20 more, they will actually give a calibration just for your mic, because the miniDSP, they do this in batches. So you get a calibration for that batch of mics, but the other one will be perfect. I am not looking for that level of perfection. Software. Till AI takes us over, for now, we need Room EQ visit, REW, for taking the measurements, MSO for consuming these measurements and producing the PEQ filters that you can import into your miniDSP, and then Flex ASIO so that you can send signals to independent speakers to take the measurements. With the Flex thing, I can send sound to my left channel, center channel, rear channel. So it is really good because HDMI has multiple channels for each of your speakers, and using this driver, you are able to just play back that physical speaker. Before, I was manually unplugging, plugging in. It's painful. Use the software, so much easier. You can just sit in your couch and just tell REW, okay, send my signal to my left speaker, send a speaker, right speaker, a subwoofer, and so on. Let's look at configuring the microphone and the HDMI port. Okay, let's configure the microphone and set it to 80% level. I found that when it's at 100%, sometimes the subwoofer can clip and then I have to re-record. So the way you go about doing this is you right-click on the speaker symbol, click Sound Settings, and then you select More Sound Settings. So left-click on the UMIK microphone, select Properties, go to the Levels tab, and set it to 80%. Similarly, right-click the Volume button, select Sound Settings on the Playback tab, pick your processor. In my case, it's the DHC 9.1. I have the Integra is my pre-pro. You need to select the HDMI that is connected to your laptop and configure the speakers. Select the speaker configuration. In my case, it's 5.1. So select what is appropriate to your setup, and then go to the next tab, click the next button and pick the full range speakers, since you don't want your laptop to do any kind of bass management. Let that be handled by your processor. You also want to click on properties of your HDMI, go to the advanced tab and set the output format to 24-bit, 48 kilohertz, because we'll be recording at that hertz, so we just want the input and output to match. Start your miniDSP software and hit connect so that it's actually connected to the device. You do not want any input or output PQ set, so make sure it's all clear. You can pick one of the configs that are clear on your miniDSP, or there's also restore and you can factory reset it. Then label the subwoofer accordingly. I have one MNK and two SVS subwoofers. So the MNK is in the rear corner, so I have labeled that MK, and then I have my front left and front right. For the processor configuration, you want to set your subwoofer at some distance so that after MS is done, you can either increase or decrease the distance. So I kept it at 10 feet. For a small room, 100 Hz crossover is recommended. So even though my speakers can do 80, I have set my crossover at 100 since I have a relatively small room. The processor must also be set for multi-channel processing because we're going to be using the center channel to drive the subwoofer. The miniDSP will be connected to LFE out, but we're going to let the crossover of the processor to kick in so that it sends everything below 100 to the LFE channel and drive the subwoofer that way. So you also need to disconnect the center speaker since we don't want any sound coming from the center speaker during the measurement, and turn off all the equalizers. And you also don't want any post-processing like Dolby Digital or whatever it may be. Switch all that off. You just want multi-channel and the crossovers to be engaged. Now let's start REW software in preparation for taking measurements. So go to the preferences and pick the ASIO driver and pick the Flex ASIO. In here, in the properties of the Flex ASIO, for the input device, you're going to pick your microphone, and the output device is going to be your receiver. And also note in this image that I have that I am using the front left speaker for timing. It is very important that you use acoustic timing when you take all your measurements. Otherwise, the MSO software will not be able to calibrate correctly. And in the output drop down, you can pick different speakers. Currently, I have selected the LFE channel, so which means I have my LFE going to my miniDSP, and then with my miniDSP controller, I can pick one subwoofer at a time as I make my recording. Also, since we will be integrating the main speakers with the subwoofer, you will also do a recording for the left and the right speaker, and you just change the output here to do that. Keep a copy of this checklist somewhere that is visible to you, because when you do different runs, I at least tend to forget some step or the other. So this is my checklist. I cross-check. I make sure that the crossovers are set at 100. That doesn't usually change, so that shouldn't be a problem. I have to remember to clear the equalizers on the miniDSP, and I also need to reset the subwoofer distance back to 10, so that it's kind of in that initial state where I'm going to run my test, and I need to disconnect my center speaker. Now we're going to be taking measurements from 10 Hz to 300 Hz at all seating locations. We'll be driving the left and the right channel main speakers, and we'll use the center channel crossover to drive the subwoofer. All right, let's take some measurements. First, we are going to use labeling consistently. So the labeling style is first is the seating location, followed by the subwoofer or the speaker. So in this scenario, R is for right. That's the right seat next to the main listening position, and then the front left subwoofer. So use some naming convention that is consistent, because you will need to know that when you import these values into MSO. And we're going to use the left, center, and right channels for the measurements. So the left and right is going to measure left and right. For the center channel, even though the subwoofer is connected to your subwoofer out, we're going to send signal to the center channel. Center channel, the actual speaker is disconnected. We expect the crossover to kick in and send that signal to the LFE channel and drive the subwoofer that way. And that is how MSO knows how the crossovers are happening. So this is how the output drop down looks like when you have the Flex ANSIO driver selected. You get to pick each and every channel you have, and we're going to be using 3 of them. For reference, set your front left or front right speaker, and then you shouldn't be changing it. It'll be the same for all your measurements. And then for individual measurements, we'll start with taking measurement for the front left, the front right, And for the subwoofers, we'll select front center. And then in the miniDSP, you will start unmuting the respective subwoofers that you're measuring. Just to repeat, make sure your acoustic timing is on, and that is very important. At this stage, you have all your measurements done from all your seat locations, and you're ready to export it. So click on File, Export, and select the option to export all measurements as text. After you click Export setting, you will be presented with this screen. You can stick with all the defaults except for the custom smoothing. You need to pick Use Custom Smoothing and select No Smoothing, because we don't want any smoothing data when we feed all this to MSO. Now we get into the MSO software, which takes in the REW measurements that you have, and then you run simulations to figure out the best PEQ and delay settings. So start the software, click File, and then click on Measure Import with Measurement Import. Since we took measurements for main speakers as well as sub, we will be importing both. So select both here. So once you import it, you will see something called config1. I have renamed that to baseline, and then I cloned it and called another one called boost. You may also create another one called no boost, where you don't want any PEQs to have any boost, you just want it to be 0. When I did without boost, my subwoofer delay was like a 20 or something, like really big, and the result wasn't as good as allowing for boost. So I instead selected 3 dB boost. I will put a link to another MSO tutorial that actually goes through a lot more detail, so it may be worth watching that first. And then this could be more like a quick review on picking stuff up or what values to put in. So this is a screen where we are telling how we want to optimize. So when you right click on any of the configurations, you have this options on optimization, and we are trying to do minimize seat to seat variation. And I've kept the stuck to almost everything which is a default compute reference levels automatically. The only thing that we need to pick here is the main listening position. If your first set of recording was called MLP, it would be selected by default, but just confirm, because MLP is the measurement to which you want MSO to optimize the most, because that is the primary listening position. So this screen is where you want to tell it which frequency range you want to optimize for. I went from 15 to 200. You may want to use different values based on what your subwoofer is capable of. Maybe you want to go 20, and maybe if others want to go down to 10. So pick what works for you or what you need. As I mentioned before, I did change my maximum boost. By default, it is 0. I went for maximum boost of 3, which means total boost has to be a bit higher. So that's why it's at 3.1. I found this gives me a much better result when boost was allowed a little bit versus no boost at all. When I had no boost at all, the delay of my subwoofer was really long, something like 20 plus. And the gains were also had some crazy numbers on it. So this worked out better. So this is for the input side of the PEQ. So miniDSP I got input PEQ as well as on the output side. And all the settings that are common to all the subwoofers, MSO optimizes that for the input side of things, and on the output side, it does individual EQ for each sub. So you'll see the big numbers is probably set across the board, which will be on the input side, and then there'll be much lower numbers on the output side of things. And you also pick how many PEQs you want to use. By default, it was 8. Since miniDSP is 10, I set it for 10 for all of it. And at the end of the process, it was using all the 10 PEQs, both on the input as well as the output side. After giving your options for optimize, then right click on the configuration and click optimize. And it'll run for how much ever time you ask it to. If you set it for, by default, is 5 minutes. If you give it 10 minutes, it'll run for 10 minutes. Once that is done, you can then right click on it and view the performance metrics. And in my case, it's showing that there is 0.81 deviation from a perfectly flat curve. So you can look at these numbers, run different experiments, and once you're happy with what you see, then you can export these things out. Once optimization is done, some of the delays may be negative. So you want to right click on your subwoofer channel and then just select normalize gains and normalize delays. So that will make all the delays positive. Before we are ready to export, we need to tell MSO what kind of hardware we have. So you have to select your AVR, and the AVR, maybe your AVR takes settings in feet or meter, and then there'll be the smallest amount by which you can move the number. So put those values in here. And of course, you want to enable miniDSP if you're using miniDSP, and select 96 kilohertz. So then this is now ready for export. Finally, we get to the screen where we save all the settings, configurations. You do have the option of running different optimizations and looking at the results. Once the export is done, you should see one text file for the input side and then one text for each subwoofer. Since I have three, we see the front, left, right, and the M and K sub, and then there's the boost input side, which is the input PQ. The next step would be to import these into miniDSP. You want to right click on your configuration once it's optimized and click on show filter report. Then scroll all the way to the bottom where it'll give you the final gain and delay settings. So these things you have to manually enter into miniDSP. If you look at the report that I got and look at my miniDSP screen, you will see for M and K, the gain it's set to minus 2.2 dB. So I have set it to minus 2.2 dB, and my delay is 11.15. So you need to do that. This entry has to be done manually, and then you click on the PQ here and you import the corresponding PQ. Now it's time to verify the results. For this, at this point, you should have all your speakers hooked up and crossovers are set correctly. And you're going to play back the sweep through both your left and right speaker. When you are taking measurements, you went one by one. You did your left speaker separately, and then you did your right speaker. But when we're verifying the results, we're going to run the sound to both the left and right speakers and let the crossovers energize the subwoofers. And that is how you're going to measure it. So you're just going to measure in the three locations, your main listening position in my case, and then on the left and the right side. This is the group delay, and it'll be nice to have it all within 20 milliseconds. This is the RT60 DK, and it's useful for smaller rooms compared to the RT60 measurements. Now, I'm not too familiar with this chart, and I think I have a little too much room treatment on the higher frequency, so probably have to put some diffusers, and there's probably something going on at the lower frequencies too. This is the spectrogram, and I think it looks kind of good. MSO has an option to view the actual results compared to the calculated one. For this, export the result that you want from REW as text only, and this time you'll probably just export one or two results that you care about, and then go to MSO and then import plot only measurement. Right click on the graph that you want to import this property and click graph properties, then go to data measurement. You should see your measurement showing up. In my case, it is the MLPL result. So checkbox the ones that you need and click OK or apply. So this is how my actual result looks like compared to the modeled. I know it's slightly off, and maybe when I gain more knowledge, it'll match better, or maybe reality and modeling, there'll always be some difference. Here are the links to various interesting sites. I will also put this along with the description so people will find it clickable. Hopefully this video will save people several days. If I had this video, I think I would have saved well over a month, because I've been trying all kinds of random stuff, playing with the alignment tool in REW, and didn't have much success with that. MSO just is a game changer. And finally, thanks to the members in AVS forum who patiently kept answering questions over and over, because I keep stumbling, and this is kind of this trial and error stuff. Sometimes when you see some result and you're like, hey, that didn't happen in the past, and then you don't know what you changed. Was it the subwoofer? Did you forget to connect it? Did you turn on a sub? all kinds of confusions and things to learn in the process. So yeah, special thanks to the people in AVS forum who even introduced me to miniDSP, and I knew about REW, but miniDSP is something I did not use. Uh, we definitely have to thank the authors of REW. REW has been around for many years now, and I don't think we could be doing anything meaningful without REW, where we can actually take measurements and not just guess based on hearing. And finally, Andy, who has written this MSO software, and is also available, he's made it free for people to just download and install and use it. And it takes it just saves so many hours. I mean, it's so amazing to just watch the optimizer. Just you see your curves, and then you run optimize. Just as you keep watching, you can see your frequency curve just being flattened out before your eyes. Within 5 minutes, it did a good job. I also just, for the fun of it, did 10 minutes, but after 7 minutes, 8 minutes, there wasn't really any more optimization, and I was within 1 dB. And it is really, really cool. And now this process is also repeatable. If I change any of my configurations, throw in a new bass trap, remove a bass trap, add in diffusions, all I have to do is just take these measurements and run it through MSO and just input the new number. There's no more guessing around and all that. And also the subwoofers, right? It doesn't have to really be perfect. I can put my subwoofer kind of where I want it to be and just let the EQ take care of the rest. So thanks again, and hopefully this is useful to you all. Bye.